teams I have no hope for. That's the worst thing. So if we go next, well, the joke is, I actually did have BDS here, but even Zabatine, you can know he speaks French, guys. Even he had them 7th, to be fair. So neither of us had BDS high up. But here's where I think we start the convo. And the joke is, this is probably just going to be a glazing session for BDS because there's so many positives. Like, here's a reason why I know this team is very well coached, Zabatine. Aside from the fact, spoiler, I do actually know Striker a little bit from Kami Corp and BDS, etc. So I've also had the benefit of asking him questions, etc. But again, if I was looking as an outsider who knew nothing, here's the immediate reason that I know this team has to be well coached. Because one of the reasons I put them so far down is because I watched last year and I saw how they played. And if it's like, bro, the reason you can't remove Crown Shot, no matter what he did at Worlds, is because he was the one who were fucking playing around all day long. And it even looked in the game at the time, like when he got his resources, he shot called some of the game around himself. Now, true, I get there's two factors here. One, I've heard from the coaching angle that they thought that was too one-dimensional, essentially. Essentially what happened to Crowley was when he couldn't play the hyper carry anymore, it didn't work as well. We all know he's not like the Zeri main. Like it's true, that part did sort of not work as well later in the year. And then the other part, which you don't have to get into too much, but I'll tease it, is I have heard there was some sort of like a potential like ultimatum scenario, like is it Crowley we keep or is it Adam? Because spoiler, they don't get along, guys. Like they're not only are they players who both want like play to my lane, but they're just like personalities that, like in English we say chalk and cheese. They don't go together at all. Like, but now here's the funny thing, Zabatine. I would have said before the year, because I only saw that one style of BDS, coaches have fucked up here. They picked the wrong guy. Why would you pick that guy? This is how I know they killed it. Because they really did completely invert the way the team plays. Play to top lane for Adam. The joke of the ice guy, when I was critiquing him, is, Crowley, his job was not to be Crowley. The amazing thing was, they actually did play like a totally different style. And not only did it work, like, by the way, I think if Adam had been in, they'd have been in the final. And the way the final went, fuck knows, maybe they even could have given G2 a good game. And the last thing I'll say is this. I do think, actually, once they all played for him, Adam was the best top laner for me. I thought it was really good, actually. It actually justified his style. It wasn't just some, like, I mean, you can't say one trick anyway. It's like a 3-trick or whatever. He's not that even more. He's just a really good player now, guys. Like, this team's actually, like, again, fabulously coached team, in my opinion. Like, it, again, worked so well together. The joke is when I critique some of the players, what they're not getting is, I'm sort of saying individually, you aren't the best player, but the fucking team is way better. It's more than some of the parts, as we say in English. So, give me your thoughts on BDS. Obviously, we were both really wrong on this one.
I mean, I was wrong, and I think that the reason I was worried about still showed, but they got a way more offset than I thought, by the good systems. And I can't praise BDS enough for once in multiple years being an organization that does the thing right. You see the way like C9 does most of the things right in NA, and they get ahead of everyone.
Yes.
I think that BDS, like, you have to understand that the price to be second with such a cheap roster has been to be last and dead 10th and keeping their projects, on track for the last 2.5 years. So now they're harvesting the fruits that, they went through all the seasons with the tree, and now they're harvesting the fruits, right? That's finally summer. They can eat the juicy fruit. So I'm very happy because it's not only you mentioned about Striker, but they had a really tough choice to make because they had a pretty good year last year.
Yeah.
And Striker was not the head coach, and there was Goto, and these two guys, I mean, Goto was my assistant coach. And I think it's a very hard thing to promote someone and ditch your head coach because there are probably dynamics that they thought was more important, meaning that the person who's above the coaches and probably even above the general management at BDS, like the sport direction, which we don't mention enough in esports, had the vision that Striker was the man they needed in terms of culture for this group of players. And therefore, they decided to give him more tools to push his vision about his player to the fullest. What's the outcome of this? You see Nuke and Sheo, who has shown in the past years very weak showings quite often. Not they're bad, because they can play very high, but they are not consistent. They've been able to be way more consistent this split. I've seen still Sheo on his main Vi do Q flash with Vi and fail it 2 times in a split on his main. This has to be fixed, guys. Like, this is super important for the future of BDS. Despite that, Nuke played probably the best split of his career. Sheo played the best split of his career. Adam is now a well-rounded top laner. Ice was the right pick for what they wanted to do, and Labrov, I don't know what they did to Labrov
Smurfed,
for him
didn't
to
he? He
play
was
that
unbelievable.
well.
He might
I
actually
don't
have
understand, man.
I actually think he was the best support player, mate. He was really fucking sick.
I don't know. Like I lost hope for Labrov. I was part of the people that were like, it's been a year, it's been 2 years,
It was
been
years
3
and years,
years.
maybe 3 or 4 years. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, when is this player gonna show what he's capable of? And now everything feels to click, like it's clicking. And I don't think it's, I would completely align with you. I don't think it's random. I think Striker, I know him a little bit too. I speak with him when I have the chance to. I like people in this industry that are ready to die to win.
Yes.
You know, this is the same thing as Mad Lions. It's like they have an idea and they're like, I'll do it. If it fails, I'll be guilty of doing it, but I'll do it to the fullest.
Yes.
And Striker had a vision for this team. He's executing it very well. And I think even showing that you can bench your best player before means that the culture of BDS is more important than the results. And
Yes.
it has been the case for the last 2 years and a half. And for this very specific reason, thank you so much for BDS for not being like the other teams. Not selling your soul for a winter split or a semi-final or some type of like chocolate medal that nobody's going to remember in the next 2 years and be like, this is our goal. Like we want to have this culture of performance and we'll just, stand our ground versus any player in the world. And if we have to lose everything, we will. I love this mindset because I think that's the only way you end up winning.
Yeah, I also think, to echo what you're saying here, the reason why it was so ballsy to do this is exactly because I don't think any other coach almost would do this, Sabatine. I actually think the obvious thing another coach would do would go, fuck, look how good we were in spring. Run it back. And then you run the exact same roster back. And here's the reason why, if you were the coach, that might even be a smarter idea or a safer idea. Because then if it goes badly, people will see in the server, like maybe Crowley doesn't play as well. Then people will just go, Crowley wasn't good enough, right? Meanwhile, if this roster really had have gone where we thought they were going to be and be like bottom of the league, everyone would have said exactly, blame the coaches. They fired Crowley. Like it's actually all, the gamble here was enormous in terms of like public reputation. I'll even throw this in there as well. Just like with Carmine Corp and Yamato, Crowley is literally one of the people who goes on those streams and is friends with all the talent and content creators. So you were also walking into a minefield there because those people are going to be so horny to flame you if you ever start to fail with this lineup and be like, see? And by the way, the whole thing would have all been like, like hashtag free Crowley, because remember, he's still on the bench. Like, bring him back, put him back in, just admit you were wrong, put him back in. But as you say, they gambled on a massive vision and they also did it building off what they did last year. So I'm with you. The striker guy, like, he's actually shown, I have mad respect just for that move alone. And then if you add in, by the way they did handle the drama with the Adam benching, etc., I think that was masterfully played, mate. Because what was brilliant about it was, and as a coach, I wanted to ask you about this actually specifically from your angle, which is, first of all, there are very few players will ever bench a star player. Spoiler, this guy benched Crowley completely and then benched Adam for a playoff thing for attitude. This guy's shown he's willing to pull the trigger if he believes in it and you go against what he says. But the more important thing I'd say is this. I actually think the statement he released and the fact he waited till the very end to do it was a masterclass of PR. Because if you read that statement, it's not at all vitriolic. It's not at all blaming people. He actually just very calmly lays out, and he actually uses what you call like de-escalating language, which makes it sound less and less bad. And suddenly when you read that statement, it just seems like essentially like, it's almost like between the lines. He's like, look, Adam had a little moment. I've sorted it with him. He understands who's in charge. And, maybe he's back in next play. Like, it was perfect. Essentially what was brilliant about it was it allowed Adam to not feel humiliated. It allowed him to actually walk it back. And now, by the way, they played the game. They've done what they've done. He's had his moment where he got benched. If he comes back next split and he plays well, and he's one of the best players again, there'll be no problem for anyone. This will be a blip on the radar and it'll never have to be brought up again. Whereas that could have been a really serious moment. That could have been some like feud, sometimes like in football, if the star players have feud with the coach, they have to pick, right, which one do we fire and ultimate. That could have gone that way, and it didn't. Like, somehow they like put the genie back in the bottle, as they say. I thought this was fabulous the way they handled this drama, mate.
Dude, I feel like we are so not used to it anymore in esports.
Yeah.
Just it's a bench. I that's something that's I really felt when I was a coach is like the weight of benching is disproportionate in this industry.
Yes.
Because I feel like, I had to make benching choices. We had visa issues in 2019, so I had to open with my academy team. So it was Dardo, Gate, like definitely not the roster we planned to work with, but Arrow couldn't join, so it was impossible to play. So I decided that at some point in the season, Crown came to me and was like, I need a break. So I put Scarlet the next week, and everybody was like, this guy Zabutin is probably out of his brain. And it's like, no, I mean, this is things happen in a team. They're real humans. So sometimes, you gotta take. And so because of all these things and all these intangible you don't have, I knew it was not that serious, because if it was that serious, Adam would have been kicked from the team. The reason he's kept is because I think that there are boundaries between staff and players, and you have your team culture. And it is extremely important to not bend the knee when players do these things, because you have a deadline, because in sports, there will always be a deadline. So you always have the chance of showing and leading by example, of being, yes, okay, we'll bench our best player for this split, and we'll explain very calmly why. And that's just, it was very factual at the end of the day. It was, it was heated in the moment. Everybody understood, but because we are a good team, we're going to make sure that everybody endure the consequences of their action, and then resume everything was normal again. And I think that's fantastic. I mean, BDS is very hard to criticize, man, because even like we're spoken about Adam, but I think every player has been overperformed.
Oh, for sure.
Individually, Nuke has been so good. Like, of course, he doesn't have a lot of picks, but Nuke has been extremely good with Azir, for instance, and his Orianna Shockwave have been amazing. And I'm very surprised as well about Sheo. Sheo reminds me sometimes of all the Enkos, the guy that goes in between the lines, dodge the vision, and finds this very specific open kill at 15 minutes when the games are very, very hard to break. He's been this guy very consistently this split. So, I mean, props to BDS. I'm very happy for the region that we have a team that gatekeeps all the bad ones.
Yes, that's
actually great. Don't beat BDS, you don't deserve to play G2.
By the way, unfortunately, that was actually one of the things I actually remember. Now, that's actually one of the things that triggered them, is I basically made a tweet. Now I've remembered, by the way. It's just something we were talking about before, where what happened was I made that point, basically. I actually give an analogy to Counter-Strike, if people know, because in Counter-Strike we have a similar team. It's called Virtus Pro, this Russian team, and they have a really strange style of play, but it's super coherent. And so if you can't play against that style, you're not going to be a top 3 team in the world. And so my analogy was, though, this is where they thought I was BMing them. My point was, though, my dream would be a team like BDS like that would be 4th or 5th, and then we'd have a fucking amazing LEC. But my point is, if they're 2nd or 3rd, that probably implies the other teams aren't passing the test. So even though they took that as a diss against them, it actually wasn't. But whatever, I understand the way things go when Thorin says things. So what I would say is, to bring it back, I actually also agree on the nuke angle. Here's what people don't know. This is where timing is everything. Because I obviously did flame the fuck out of them after that last one. But by the way, the last series, which to be fair also didn't have the normal top laner, they did put a brand new player in. That last series was far and away the worst League of Legends he played this whole split. Before that, he was actually doing, like you say, well, probably better than most other splits, including, by the way, I think even the split they were going to win last year, and actually individually was looking a lot better. He was a top half mid laner,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, lane-wise, he still struggles, but team fights, he was much better. But I think it's very easy to maneuver in team fights as a carry if you have everybody doing their job. Yes. I think people put too much emphasis on carries. For instance, we're probably going to speak about Casey at some point, but you look at Upset, and he hasn't made a lot of mistakes in this team fight. But if the support is not contesting the vision, if the front laner is not sitting in the front lane, if the flank is not covered, you literally have one flanker that comes on you, you get one shot, and you're like, oh, Upset hasn't been... No, the truth is, for carries, you need everybody else to make space for you. And I think that BDS has found a really good systems where, because Adam's so aggressive, because Labrov has been picking this blitzcrank, all this engaged champ that he's really good at. And Sheo has done a lot of, Sheo has taken the short end of the stick for the whole split, taking, kind of the pick that nobody wants, or playing these kind of blind pick champions that help drafting better for the lanes. But they're all ready to make space and die for the carries. And then you see Nuke arriving at the end of the team fight, or Ice, and you're like, oh, this guy is popping off. Of course he's popping off. Nobody has spells against him because everybody else before him did his job. So props to BDS. Everything, it's very hard for me to find something negative to say about BDS. The only thing I would mention is, I think that in terms of individual skill, I can still see a limit. There is kind of a glass ceiling for them, where if other teams...
The obvious problem is, if they go to Worlds or something, you start to wonder, right?
Even in EU, if Fnatic starts to have good systems, if I'm speaking really individual players, if Vitality stops shitting the bed, I think it's very hard for a team like BDS to outplay a team like Vitality.
Right.
If Hylissang is not 0-7-0 at 12 minutes. You know, it becomes much harder to play because you see these players missing spells. And that doesn't seem very bad because they win the game at the end. But if the macro is 50-50 and they start to play from even ground against other teams, you're going to see that these flows are going to become way more apparent. These missed spells, these missed hooks, this splash in the wall and stuff. So I'm really careful about making BDS a super top team that's going to be contender at the early stage of the year, because I think there is a margin of progression for a lot of teams and BDS is not part of them. I don't think they can be, because this individual level is much slower to fix, to address, right? It's a slower process.
Yeah, on that note, I think what I would say is this is another reason why, even though I wasn't dissing them, they took it as a diss, right? Because essentially, in League, if you're not the LCK and the LPL, you always have to ask, how would this look against much better opposition? I mean, the reason why, even though sometimes they choke, it's easy to say the best teams, the best LPL or LCK team, is we see them play the best teams now. We know what they can do against the best possible players. The problem BDS have is this. When I watched them in the League, a reason I also saw them as like the ultimate gatekeeper, although the joke is they end up being a contender because the other teams didn't get through the gate. The reason they were the ultimate gatekeeper is, dude, this team wasn't snowballing anyone the first like 10, 15 games or something. Like, this was the team that would just be like even or slightly behind early, but they'd get to the late, and then when they got to those objectives and team fights though, they would just, the joke is they were doing like European at JDG, they just win the fight from behind. But here's the joke, right? I did have someone make a comment on one of my episodes where I said that, and they were like, yeah, but that's hypocritical because you praised JDG. Like, listen to what I just said before. JDG doesn't have like aliens to play like Space Jam where they're off, we're behind against the aliens. They're like, no, they already can win. I already saw them win against the best teams in the world from behind as well. The problem BDS have is if they have that exact same style, they don't have a way better early game and maybe a bit more star power from certain positions. The problem is you get to that team fight against a T1, you aren't winning it. You know, I'm sorry, like that. Gen G, it's over. Like BLG, these teams will murder you in that team fight if they're even slightly ahead. So
even G2, man, I think you're going just too far. I think we've seen in the series against G2, they got 3-0'd, and I firmly think that the problem you have, right? Because as a team, when you're bottom team, you have bottom team problems. They have the runner-up problem, which is you think you're good and then you get destroyed against the best team. Yes. And that breaks your belief and your systems. And I think a lot of the frustration that probably led even to the Adam problem has stemmed from bad Scrim quality and probably playing against G2 as well, because it was the kind of a honeymoon phase. And then you have this reality check of,
I've got a detail for you, mate. This is something I actually got wrong initially, but I checked it. I've got it right now. You know, when they released the Remain Scrim thing, dude, there's one that leaps off the page, which is literally a few days before Adam was benched. G2 went 7-0 in scrims against BDS.
Yeah, that's very specific day.
Bro,
14th.
There's two things that are obviously inferred from that. One, I could imagine that might make Adam a bit more annoyed if he's getting banged out in scrims. And then two, if I was striker, this is why it's also genius to do the benching then. Because you're probably not going to win the final anyway if you make it. So if there was ever the one time you really could give up a playoff spot, this is probably it, because G2's winning the split anyway. You know what I mean? What do you think?
Dude, it was Valentine's Day. They got 7-0. There is a good joke to make, right? I'm not gonna make it. You guys yes. You can guess it at home.
Exactly. Well, the joke goes like this: I hope at least G2 bought them dinner before they fucked them. That's the joke, right? It's one of those ones, right? Right?
Just a box of chocolate first.
There you go.
But yeah, I feel like people don't understand that this really breaks teams, like getting 7-0, because. If you ever try to become good at a game and you have a rival, I know it doesn't really happen in like multiplayer service game like League of Legends, but if you play, for instance, fighting games or something, sometimes you have a nemesis. You have someone that's very hard, and this person is kind of the gate between you and the projection you have of yourself, and you're really grinding and kind of obsessed on beating this person. And when you get a reality check the way they did, a lot of things crackles. Like you see that the flows that you had are actually much deeper than where they are. And this reality check is mentally very tough. It's a very, very harming process for anyone. And I think that through this process, they probably realized that, oh, it's going to be way harder. And the frustration probably, with Adam started there. So BDS has all the green lights as an org on League of Legends, right? That I wish Fnatic and Vitality and a lot of other teams had years ago. So I'm very optimistic for them. But with the players they have right now, I am not set on saying they're going to end up the year top 3. because there are projects with good players, better players individually than BDS that might wake up, and I hope they do. But at the same time, if I hope they do, I hope that BDS individually is going to get better, because this team that breaks you at fight the way Damwon did is a really exciting outlook on the LEC. Like I like this idea of having different playstyle, having MDK that plays at your face, having G2 that plays these weird picks, and having this BDS super strict German efficiency, even though they are like Swiss, German efficiency, League of Legends, we go on Drake, we beat you at Drake. If you can't do that, we'll win the game. And I really like this kind of checks in leagues, that in tournaments, they're very important. So yeah, just props to BDS overall.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.